Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today's video is going to be something that I haven't really done before. Today, I'm going to be making a video asking some questions to AnCaps. And for those of you who don't know, that's Anarcho-Capitalists. In short, they're people who want to get rid of all governments and let the free market do its thing. Which, honestly, I think it would be a pretty interesting idea to try, and it would be so fascinating to see how it would play out in a place like America. I think it would be a grand experiment if we could take one of our states and implement this, just so we could settle quite a few disputes and see if there's anything to it. But anyway, I digress. Now, me personally, I am a minimalistic government kind of guy, okay? I think that you need at least a little governing to keep a healthy society running, but I'm always open to ideas and conversations. Keep in mind, too, that I also think that AnCaps are the most sensible and reasonable out of all the anarchists out there. A lot of the other ones are just batshit insane. I mean, Anarcho-Communist, holy shit. Anyway, I find I can agree with a lot of what they advocate for. But again, I'm not entirely sold on the idea of Anarcho-Capitalism. I find a lot of arguments for and against come across as mostly conjecture, which is understandable because we don't have a good example of an anarcho-capitalist country that we can point to. Sure, okay, you can point out small-scale examples, which is fine and good. Again, I think it would be great to implement it in a state and see how it goes. But I feel like scaling something that was implemented in a county may not work the same if implemented across a whole country. Again, a lot of arguments for and against seem to have a lot of conjecture. For instance, I don't know what would happen if it was implemented across an entire country. I can't say for sure. I mean, if we're going by how it looks on paper, sure, but if we're going by how things look on paper, then communism is a good idea, which we all know how that actually plays out in reality. What I'm basically saying is, you can say, well, people would do this or people would do that, but you don't really know for sure. It may stand to reason that people would do that, but people aren't always reasonable or rational. But we can't really have a good conversation like that now, can we? So going forward, let's treat these questions and responses with a bit of good faith towards, the possibilities of the outcomes. I suspect at some point we'll disagree on what will be the most likely hypothetical response or action from people in certain scenarios. But again, I think that's also a good conversation to have. Human nature is a fascinating subject all on its own and is worth investigation and debating. I'm going to try my best to avoid asking the more common questions. I've heard a lot of answers to them already. I mean, for instance, I am subscribed to Mr. Dapperton, one of the more known AnCaps here on YouTube, and I've heard plenty of his responses to a lot of the more popular questions that people have asked. You'll have to forgive me if I do ask a few anyway. I mean, it's probably bound to happen, but if I do, I'll try to present them with a little more substance to make them more interesting. Now with all that out of the way, let's just go ahead and jump into my biggest contention. Perhaps this has already been answered somewhere and by someone, but if it has, I've missed it. Nuclear weapons. By far the most powerful and game-changing tool humanity has been able to conjure up thus far. And in my opinion, this seems to be the largest monkey wrench in the idea of having an AnCap country, and I believe rightfully so. Before I get too far into it, I know this may be an American-centric view on this question, but I live here in the good old US of A, so if you wouldn't mind humoring me, let's continue with the assumption that the USA is where Anarcho-Capistan has decided to raise its flag. So let's say that your dreams have come true and the American government has suddenly wished out of existence. Poof, no more America. What do we do about nuclear weapons? Firstly, how would you divide up our current nuclear arsenal? Do any groups claiming to be capitalist military have claim? Do they divide them up? Do they go to the highest bidder? And in that case, who gets the money? The primary question here is, who gets to claim ownership over the now vacant military arsenals, including the most powerful weapons on the planet? Secondly, let's assume that you have a way to work all of that out. What happens then? You have privately contracted militaries for hire with nuclear weapons. What's stopping them from imposing their rule over Anarcho-Capistan with their newfound power? I assume that the most logical answer is other private military powers that people will pay to protect them. Now, I personally believe in capitalism, but I think the flaw here would be that other countries could simply come in and buy out these companies or pay them off. What happens when the people you are paying to protect you get a better deal in a lengthy contract to subvert any repercussions to their reputation with the general population? I think you see where I'm going with this, and I think it's a very serious issue. You have to worry about countries outside of AnCapistan who want all of those nice resources and that land that you're sitting on. You see, the free market is supposed to balance itself out with incentive. A company does something sketchy, and the public stops funding them due to their declining reputation. But with money flowing in from an outside source, that kind of subverts the balance of the free market. Now, I'm looking at this from the perspective of, if I was another country that wants to take over America, how would I do it? And I think it's very important to put yourself in those shoes. And if America is now AnCapistan, well, I'm just going to pay off the military powers that be and promise them all manner of luxuries and benefits to either join me or simply stand aside. You could argue that these companies wouldn't give in to temptation because, they believe in AnCapistan and they wouldn't do that. But I don't think it's entirely unreasonable to place your bets on human greed. So, while we're on the subject of other hostile countries interacting with AnCapistan, you have to realize that a bunch of military companies are going to be a lot less effective in battle against a single unified nation's army. Let's say that all of those mercenaries have hearts of gold and truly do embody Anarcho-Capitalism, unwavering in their convictions to AnCapistan. You still have a bunch of broken up military powers. For the free market to work, you can't have a singularly powerful military in AnCapistan. Otherwise, you have a military superpower, and the dangers of that power becoming corrupt and enforcing its own rule is very real. So like I said, you have a bunch of separate military powers against a single, unified national army. Any strategist worth his salt will tell you that you're at a severe disadvantage here. Even if all the companies are cooperating, they're not going to be as effective as the invading forces. Again, though, I suppose you could make the argument that you could appeal to the generosity of other nations to intervene, which is a fair point. If you assume that the international community will aid you against an invading country, you would stand a far better chance. But let's play devil's advocate. Just for argument's sake, let's say that no country wants to get mixed up in the affair. Nobody just wants to get involved in this war. So where does that leave AnCapistan? You see, this is one of the reasons why I'm a small government kind of guy. I mean, purely from a strategical point of view, you need good generals who are used to leading a unified force to properly present an imposing figure on the battlefield. They also need to be well-funded and well-manned, which is one of the reasons America is on top when it comes to military might. Again, you could say that in AnCapistan, people will donate money and draft themselves in such a situation, which is a fair point, okay? I personally would donate what I had and sign up to fight if I lived in AnCapistan and we were being invaded. You do not want to be invaded and conquered by somebody else. You don't. It never ends well. I would do it in a heartbeat, okay? And, again, you could argue, without people being taxed and such, they would have more money to give. Yeah, fair point. But this relies pretty heavily on the virtue of your citizens. Like it or not, you're probably going to have more than a few cowards and greedy people who would rather lose everything than willingly participate. That's where, yet again, AnCapistan is at a disadvantage due to its principles. Yes, it may very well work out. You may have enough people willing to lay it all down for AnCapistan. But you don't have the assurance that you would with a government-maintained military.
What I say there, Captain, have you not seen the amount of money that the military wastes? They can be so much more effective under AnCapistan.
Fair enough point. You can point to trillions of dollars that the military has pissed away. You can prove evidence, but the fact still remains the government has a fallback plan. They can forcefully draft people. They don't have to worry about the charity of others. They can force, taxes and stuff. They can do that to ensure that they have military power and might when they need it. And in AnCapistan, you kind of don't.
I know. It goes against the Nonaggression Principle. You're forcing people to do things against their will.
And I know. And I personally do like the non-aggression principle, but like it or not, it's effective as hell and insanely useful when it comes to defending your country. All in all, my main contention here is that AnCapistan seems a lot less stable and reliable when it comes to defense against outside countries. Perhaps that's a chance you're willing to take for the added freedoms you'll enjoy, an entirely respectable position in my opinion, but I would just like to hear AnCaps' views when presented with these dilemmas. Also, in my opinion, the dream of AnCapistan relies entirely too much too heavily on the presumed virtue and common sense of the people in it. I mean, I personally like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I like to think it makes me feel better. It really does, to presume that most people are virtuous and have a lot of common sense. It makes me feel better to think that there are more good people out there than bad people. But that may not be true. I don't know. And it really comes down to, I suppose, are you willing to bank on that being true for AnCapistan? Do you think it's going to succeed? Do you think that there are enough good and virtuous people that will participate in AnCapistan for it to succeed? Okay, so my other big question, something that I am incredibly curious about. How do you plan on making AnCapistan become a reality? For instance, let's say that your name is Mr. Daps, and you advocate heavily for Anarcho-Capitalism. It's something that you really believe in. How does Mr. Daps plan on setting in motion the machinations which will lead to the birth of
Glorious AnCapistan?
I mean, the whole purpose of advocating for something is to one day see it implemented, right? So how do you topple the government and replace it with the free market, all without violating the Nonaggression Principle? Do you do it by trying to get more AnCaps in position of power? Slowly chopping away at the tree of government, removing one piece of legislation at a time? Or do you take a chainsaw and just follow the whole damn thing at once? And more importantly, how do you prevent the whole country from, not becoming a bad playthrough of Fallout minus the radiation? I am extremely curious about your plans and strategies for implementing your ideas. What path do you plan on taking to making your dreams and ideas happen? Do you think you will be able to convince enough people and get them on your side to make it happen? What are your plans and strategies for that? What are the steps leading up to the day that the last document is signed away and the government is abolished? Is there a next step in your activism beyond advocating for it on YouTube?
And here's an absolutely fantastic segue into speaking of the day that the government is officially abolished, okay?
Without a government presence, what's to stop warring factions from emerging and vying for power yet again? There are going to be people who want to reinstitute their own government, and I have heard AnCaps say that they are more than welcome to create their own governments in their own communities, of course, so long as they're voluntary. But what happens when they gain enough power and influence to take on some of those military companies guarding those towns and cities? So, by this point in the video, I'm sure that somebody has noticed kind of a recurring theme, okay? And the reason for that is, I think conquest is just a part of human nature, okay? We've participated in it throughout all of recorded history. How do you stop that? There are going to be people who do not agree with the non-aggression principle, and due to its very nature, you can't force that principle on them. How would you form AnCapistan in America, and how would you keep it AnCapistan? Well, ladies and gents, I think I'm going to stop right here for now, just so this video doesn't get too long and unwieldy. I'd really like to hear back from some AnCaps, and even if I don't, perhaps some of you listening will have gained some food for thought. Now, if you are an AnCap and you would like to respond, I would like to ask a favor of you. Could you please humor me on some of these points and tell me what you would do, or what you think would happen in some of these hypothetical situations? I mean, it's fair enough to say, they wouldn't happen because of X, Y, and Z. I want to hear those too. Sure, but those are pretty easy to come by. I mean, it dismisses the whole hypothetical situation, and I'm more interested in hearing how you would deal with these problems if they were to present themselves in our theoretical AnCapistan. I want to see, I want to understand how AnCaps would approach and overcome some of these obstacles were they to arise in their society. If you do make a response or argument to this video, let me know, and I will put a link to it down below in the description so everyone who is interested can get in on it. You can let me know in the comments section or message me over on the Twitters. I mean, I may make a follow-up video if some good points or arguments are made, or if this video gets enough attention. And for those of you watching, let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know what you thought, okay? It's pretty different compared to my usual content, but I planned on doing some branching out this year with the types of content that I make. I think it's going to be pretty interesting if I make some content that other people can respond to. Rather than just making content all the time in response to things. Well, I believe that's enough for now. I would like to thank everyone for watching. Special thanks, as always, goes to my patrons and my subscribers. You guys are still the best, and I hope you all had fun watching this video. It was fun to make, I'm not gonna lie, I had a little bit of fun, alright? Anyway, until next time, remember, Keep fighting stupidity wherever you may find it. Have a good one.